All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House for us. Thanks so much. My panel joins me now. David Urban, let me start with you. Generally, pundits are saying this is a win for President Trump, for his administration. However, he himself, when this was all winding its way through the courts, said the Justice Department should have stayed with the original travel ban, not the watered-down, politically correct version they submitted to the Supreme Court. And the New York Times reported last year that the president yelled at his staff about having to water down this order, saying, quote, "This is BS." So I know that pundits think that this is a win for the president, but does he think it's a win for him?
No, probably not. If those reports are correct, he probably doesn't view it as a win. There is obviously broad discretion for the president in matters of national security and immigration, as the court outlined, but not unlimited. And the court and the legislature serves as a check on that power. And this is a pretty narrow, travel ban. If you look at it, of the 5 countries that are represented, the 5 Muslim countries, they represent about 5% of the Muslim population in the world. You have about 140 million Muslims covered by that. There's still 1.6 billion Muslims that aren't covered by the travel ban. So if the president was looking for a complete Muslim ban, it's far from that.
Jeffrey Toobin, let me bring you in. Justice Sotomayor, writing in a dissenting opinion, wrote, quote, "The majority here completely sets aside the president's charged statements about Muslims as irrelevant. That holding erodes the foundational principles of religious tolerance that the court elsewhere has so emphatically protected. And it tells members of minority religions in our country that they are outsiders, not full members of the political community." Did the court, the majority at least, did they cast aside the president's own words? That's not how I read the decision.
Well, one way of looking at this decision is that the majority wrote an opinion about the presidency and the dissenters wrote about the president. Because the majority opinion by Chief Justice Roberts, I do think, tried to avoid as much as possible Donald Trump's words, especially during the campaign, and talked about the order itself, which does not make any reference to religion and refers only to a few countries, one of which, or 2 of which, Venezuela and North Korea, have very insignificant Muslim populations. So by the time they got around to the 3rd version of the travel ban, it had lost some of its religious character. The dissenting opinion, particularly the one by Justice Sotomayor, very much was, who's kidding whom here? This is the direct descendant of what Donald Trump said during the campaign. The only reasons these countries are on here are because they are Muslim, or a fig leaf to cover the Muslim nature of the travel ban. And that was the disagreement between the 5 votes and the 4 votes.
Anna Navarro, let's play the sound. The President Trump declaring he wanted all Muslims to be banned from entering the U.S. This is December 2015.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Now, while this case was working its way through the Supreme Court, the Trump campaign removed the shutdown language from the Trump campaign website.
I think when I was watching your introduction where you talked about it being a long-fought vindication for Trump, and that's what he was saying.
His words.
And his opponents say it is racist and discriminatory. I think it's both. I think it's racist and discriminatory, but the Supreme Court did not rule on that. And it is a long, hard-fought vindication for Donald Trump. This was one of his first policy moves. I'll tell you who else this is a win for. All those anti-establishment Trumpers who hate Mitch McConnell, that's the guy they've got to thank for this. Remember that it was Mitch McConnell denying Merrick Garland a vote for the Supreme Court for almost a year by tying it up procedurally, and yet being able to get Gorsuch to breeze through very quickly. Today we had 2 decisions that were very narrow, very narrowly decided. One was on a choice abortion case, and one was on this. So all of those folks who hate Mitch McConnell viscerally because he represents country club Republicans, they should be saying novenas and lighting candles to the man today.
And Kirsten, something interesting, Justice Kennedy, one of the swing votes usually, in a concurring opinion, he was with the majority, but I think it's fair to say he was criticizing President Trump with what he wrote. He wrote, quote, "There are numerous instances in which the statements and actions of government officials are not subject to judicial scrutiny or intervention. That does not mean those officials are free to disregard the Constitution and the rights it proclaims and protects. An anxious world must know that our government remains committed always to the liberties the Constitution seeks to preserve and protect so that freedom extends outward and last." So even though he's siding with it, he seemed concerned about things that President Trump had said, if not enacted.
Right, but I think that the rest of the court would have done well to also consider, and even he would have done well to consider more what the president had said. So you could say, well, by the time it got there, it's only 5% Muslim population, but that's still, he wanted it to be more, and he still wants that 5% to be banned. And so the point is the intention actually does really matter, and the majority was living in this sort of netherworld where Donald Trump doesn't say things. And so they were sort of pretending that this was just a conversation about executive power, and he's just any president coming along, and they're just making a decision like it's an ordinary president, when he's not an ordinary president, and when he was quite clear about what his intention was. So just because in the end he only was able to harm a small percentage of Muslims, he still was able to harm them.
Jake, can I just add one point about Justice Kennedy's comments? I think they're especially important given the timing and who Justice Kennedy is and how old he is. I mean, he's 81 years old. Tomorrow we find out whether, tomorrow is the last day of the term, it looks like, we find out whether Justice Kennedy is leaving. That did not sound to me like a justice who is anxious to turn over his precious seat on the Supreme Court to Donald Trump. That was, I thought, a rebuke of the president. Now, he didn't rebuke him with his vote, which is much more important, but that comment about how leaders should behave themselves certainly did seem directed at Donald Trump by Justice Kennedy.
You took issue, David, with something that Kirsten said.
To what Kirsten said about, not keeping America safe. That's exactly what the court allowed in this case, right? This is why the president has this broad latitude in these cases. These countries aren't picked out of a hat. These countries are places where there are very lax checks on immigration and border security. When people are leaving, Yemen, have you been to the airport in Yemen, in Sana'a? It's not a great place, I can assure you. And so these weren't picked out of a hat for places that we want to punish people. These are looked out of picked because these are places designed to keep Americans safe.
That's what he was lying?
That's what it was designed.
I mean, what were his words then? Why did he say all this?
There's campaign rhetoric, and then there's this order.
Oh, that's baloney. I'm sorry. That's just absolutely
It was much more than campaign rhetoric. I think this was also a good day for Rudy Giuliani. You'll remember he began saying crazy things way back then. And it was around this Muslim ban. And look, I think a lot of
the Muslim ban when 92% of the Muslim world, 1.6 billion Muslims, can come and go in the United States as you like.
Muslim ban because that's how it began. That's
but
what
it's
it
not
was
a Muslim
intended
ban.
to be, and they were forced through the
Well, be specific with your
process.
word. Words matter, you say. So
okay,
be specific.
What was born as the Muslim ban that has since degenerated and deteriorated into what was ruled on today. Do you like those words?
Oh, how about we've been rewritten to comply with the law?
Let's take a quick break. Does President Trump have a valid point about national security concerns regarding